So next up, we have Peter Gray. He's the Director of Product Optimization Team over at Dow Jones, which is the holding company for the Wall Street Journal, Barron's, MarketWatch, Factiva, and other leading business media properties. His team is responsible for digital experience testing, A/B and multivariate, across all of Dow Jones's digital properties, operating as an internal vendor to product owners and marketers. He launched the team as a one-man show in August 2015 and has grown it to a team of 7. So welcome, Peter.
Sorry guys, I got excited. I didn't know I was going to get that big intro. I would have waited. I would have milked the moment a little bit better. I want to talk to you guys about the last 24 months of my professional career, where I've had the distinct pleasure of building a standalone optimization team from the ground up at the Wall Street Journal, one of the world's most respected news organizations. Let's see if I make sure I get this. Looks like a detonator. Before we dive in, what do? One thing that has been bugging me ever since I started doing this kind of work is I don't think we really have a good vocabulary to describe properly with the right kind of value what it is we are in the practice, what we're experts on. Right, you've got A/B testing, which I think sounds flimsy, like it can only be applied to marketing. You've got testing, which is too easily confused with QA, and then you've got optimization, which has been bastardized beyond recognition. It's used in far too many places. I think we are persuasion scientists, and we are the practitioners of the most powerful product development discipline on earth. So hopefully in 12 months' time, someone will come back and have found the one word to describe what we do. But in the meantime, chew on that and let me know your thoughts. Here's why I think that, right? A/B testing at root is injecting direct, completely accurate, unfiltered, raw customer feedback into our product roadmaps, our acquisition strategies, and basically any decision facing a digital business. That's all it is. In my experience, it's fishing with dynamite. Taking stock. So I want to get you up to speed and give you a little bit of the story of how we got to where we are today. In 2015, the subscription business invested in this idea of optimization. I don't think they really fully understood what it was, but they invested in the form of a person, which was me, and a modest budget, with a single starting KPI, acquisition, which is a perfect place to start any testing activity because it's so easy to track. It's very easy to know whether there's an extra person paying you money or not. So in our first 6 months, it took us a little while to get ramped up and get the right tech in place, including Optimize. We ran 3 tests in 6 months. Since then, we've really blown it out of the water. We now have a team of 5, 7. We've got 2 people who are who operate as consultants, depending on who you ask. But we're running almost 10 tests a month, and I think that number is probably higher at this point. And we're spreading. Very organically, we have become this sort of internal center for excellence at the Wall Street Journal and Dow Jones, right? We started with the shop page and the checkout funnel, sort of classic acquisition areas of activity. Then we moved into the app using Optimize to solve for acquisition KPIs and also high-value onboarding KPIs. Then we moved back onto the website, onto WSJ.com to onboarding there. Then moved up funnel onto sort of the core content site, specifically, again, solely focused on acquisition KPIs. How do you talk to people about the fact that if they want to read this article, they're going to have to pay us? A couple of months ago, we got the editorial team to engage in a very aggressive headline testing program, which we monitor from a safe distance. We have partnered with the core product team, whose focus is exclusively figuring out how people consume Wall Street Journal content, grafting onto their tech and product roadmap. We've moved up funnel to our paid media teams and sort of grafted on and adding kind of that strategic layer on their activities. We have formulated a partnership with the video product team, which is sort of a separate entity, grafting onto the product roadmap as they see it. And last but not least, we actually have now got a proof of concept running with the advertising part of the business, where we are exploring selling our expertise as an additional, as sort of a premium insight layer when they go out into the marketplace selling against our very valuable audience. It's been a lot of fun. A lot of people have sort of come up here and talked about the sort of the recipe, and at the risk of telling you guys things you already know, I'm going to try to rattle through ours. The first one, which nobody else has mentioned, and every situation is different. One thing that was incredibly useful for us was having a great partner agency. In our case, it was a company called House of Kaizen. They added, when we were early days, when we didn't know what we were doing, they added an additional strategic layer that was very valuable. They brought research capabilities that were sort of outside of the standard operating procedure of Dow Jones and the Wall Street Journal. And last but and most importantly, we were able to outsource the tech effort of coding up these tests. It's very hard for a legacy business to justify the making of the 4 extra versions of the next thing, knowing that 4 out of 5 will die, instead of the next thing after that. It's very, very painful choice. So we sort of were able to bifurcate that cultural change and take the tech pain out of it. So in my humble opinion, I'd say if you can spring for the gold-plated training wheels, get them. Evangelism, right? We're in a legacy business. Some of us are in sort of tech businesses where decisions are much more data-driven on average, and others of us find ourselves in businesses where it really doesn't come so naturally. So the first thing that I started doing when I began was I would sit down and devote as much time as I possibly could to talking to anyone and everyone about what we did and trying to bring them along what I would call sort of the broad trajectory that we're all on, which is making more and more decisions based on data, with A/B testing as sort of the action layer, the weaponized endpoint of that trajectory. Velocity was absolutely critical. If any of you guys find yourself trying to launch a program like this, and you've got to get 15 signups before you can launch a test, it's time to go to the CEO tomorrow and tell him if he wants to do this, he's got to help you cook some of the cooks out of the kitchen. At some point, you will realize exactly how much opportunity there is out there, how many things there are you could test, and in that moment, you're going to be at risk of making a very unfortunate error, which is not knowing how to prioritize, not actually know how to play defense. When people start coming to you and say, test this for me and test that for me, you need to be able to have a very robust framework by which you know that the next thing you do has the best chance of delivering the most value to the business at the lowest possible cost. I didn't feel like in the span of this speech I had time to take you through it. If you are interested, I will share my prioritization template with you. I think it can prioritize any product roadmap on the face of the earth. Last but not least, dollar value for our work. Again, maybe less useful for places where the product org and the optimization org are sort of one. But in my case, I think in that case too, right, just pissed me off that the business didn't really know how much money I was making for them. So we invested a lot of effort in figuring out how to do that in a way where the CEO could look to the finance guy and says, is this guy full of shit? And he says, no, it's right. So hopefully we cracked the code on that one. And I'm very curious to hear from any of you about whether you've come up with different ways to do the same thing. So first of those 3 things are obvious. Prioritization is less so, but didn't feel like we had time, so I'm jumping right to getting credit. It's worth asking yourself, right? Do you know your own ROI? What about the fat cats and the big dogs, right? My bet is that all 3 of them, yourself included, actually don't. And here's why. When you run an A/B test, let's say, right, these are article roadblocks. This is a piece of marketing creative that sits on top of a locked article, which we use to explain to people they're going to have to pay us if they want to read it, right? So let's say that the prominent flag one at the bottom, let's say that one delivers a 37% lift in the test period. Say you run it for 30 days. During that 30-day period, there are people who are raising their hand who are saying, I'm here because of that thing that guy did. But as soon as you push that to 100%, the hands go down, right? Every other activity, especially on the acquisition side, lives on as a line item in the financial documents of our company, and we don't. And it was pissing me off. And I think it's the only path to proper respect is getting a validated numerical value in perpetuity. But it's an intractable problem because those hands go down. No one's saying I'm here because of that thing you learned anymore. So what did we do? We ran a back test. We intentionally recreated the terrible experience of subscribing to the Wall Street Journal before we started working, and A/B tested it against the current experience, which is the sum total of all the learnings that we've gotten in the intervening period. And the results were delightful. 51% top-line order lift. So that basically means that as of today, if we hadn't learned all the things we learned, about 27% of those orders would be thin air. Nothing wrong with a little mic drop. 51% is a nice number, but that's not good enough. Right, for the CEO, for a legacy business like ours, which looks to financial documents to tell the story of who's making them what money. So you can look retroactively, obviously these numbers are all fake, and say the Wall Street Journal got 100 orders a month for this period, the period which the optimization team has been running. Now, we don't know exactly when all that 51% came through, right? It didn't come all through in month 1, it didn't come all through in month 18. It came through over time. Since we can't know exactly when it dropped, we divided 51% by 18 months and assumed that about we were getting 2.8% incremental lift every month, right? Take that number, multiply it by the total orders. Now you have your optimization orders. And the final calculation, you got 51% lift, 18 months, 2.8% additional lift per month. In that period, if the Wall Street Journal got 1,800 new subscriptions, we delivered 485 of them. That's almost 27% of all orders come through our blood, sweat, and tears. Obviously, we know what the net present value of a Wall Street Journal order is. It's not $1. But there you have it. That's the calculation. Now, I'll tell you what, the big dogs and the fat cats, they were paying attention before, but I have their attention now. So shifting gears a little bit, I think personalization is a word that's on the tip of everybody's tongue these days. And I think it's really important for us to define it for ourselves and figure out when the right time to get in that game is. So here's my attempt to define it. It's a fluid display in which each component in each digital moment is what it is because of things we know about the individual user on the other side of the screen, right? Subscription marketing in the top right, the content, which article goes where, even the advertisement at the bottom right. The idea is that you'd have all of those things, an engine in the background deciding that all those things should belong there because of something I know about you on the other side. And there's really only one way to get there. It's a lot of work. And it's incremental in nature. Making experiences for segments and individuals is extremely expensive. And each new specialized treatment needs to beat the one-size-fits-all experience to justify itself. I've seen this happen in my own company. I'm sure it happens other ways too, where people start saying, wow, we got these segments. Let's just make up a way to talk to them and just push it live, right? That's the most inefficient use of labor that anyone has ever spent their time on, because you don't. The whole point is that it's annoying that human beings are so unique and complicated. It would be much easier if we were all robots and we just could write the one-size-fits-all message worked every time. And most importantly, the real reason why you don't want to get in the personalization game a little too early is that, in our experience, many one-size-fits-all learnings will always win. They will always be baked into a future state personalized experience where everything that I see is because of something they know about Peter, right? So if you jump ahead to personalization, you risk missing what I see as the vast majority of the upside of this crazy discipline we're trying to practice, the low-hanging fruit. This is us reaching out at the bounty before us. And right in front of us are these one-size-fits-all learnings, basic navigation, basic design, evergreen copy that always wins, right? These are the juiciest, sweetest fruits, and there are actually a lot of them, and they're standing right in front of us because they're so simple. If you jump ahead to segment-based experiences, say, right? Let's say I go ahead and I say, I want to figure out how to talk to opinion readers. I want to make a special subscription experience for them, Think about it. If opinion traffic is 10% of our total traffic, if I learn that cancellation messaging works on the shop page and delivers a 10% top line lift, which it does, thank you, Netflix, I'm going to have to find some way of talking to opinion readers that's so special that it's going to deliver 100% lift to deliver the same amount of value back to the business. Right? So it's just there's a law of diminishing returns here, which is you want to make sure you've really exhausted all that juicy, big, basic stuff before you get fancy, right? And then get even fancier, right, with personalization and algorithmic content display, right? Again, tiny, tiny little wins up there. If you don't believe me, here's what I think you're at risk of missing. We got this great quote from a dreamer. Small emotions are the great captains of our lives, Vincent van Gogh. He'd be rolling in his grave if he knew we were using it in this context, but he's not here to defend himself, so we'll proceed. On the acquisition side, these are some of the low-hanging fruits we've discovered. Cut the fat, adding a little color, telling people what you thought they already knew, time and place, and the eye as a muscle. This is the subscription journey in our iOS app that we inherited when we first began testing. It occurred to us that a lot of people, especially non-subscribers, probably didn't know who that guy was, Jerry Baker, our editor-in-chief. And that if we were going to try to convince them to subscribe to the Wall Street Journal, the best foot forward was not having a little fireside chat with Jerry here. So we A/B tested using Optimize, taking him out. Simplest test on the face of the earth. That delivered a 23% order uplift. This is the Android app subscription page that when we inherited it. Right? This is a sales floor. You are trying to sell people on the bells and whistles. Right? You're trying to put the smooze on so that they throw you a little cash in exchange for your content. So it occurred to us that this pack shot was a little drab. So all we did was we took a colorized pack shot. We thought it might tell the story of the value they could expect on the other side of a Wall Street Journal subscription. Doubled our conversion rate. Simple, simple, simple. This is one of my favorite ones. So on your left, you'll see an article roadblock. This is the piece of marketing. The article roadblock is what sits on top of a locked piece of content. And how we explain, right, why someone should explain that someone's going to have to pay us if they want to read it. And then on the right, that piece of creative is the top of our masthead. And part of our success, the last few years, the subscription business has undergone a real turnaround. Part of our success has been these sort of constant marketing refreshes where the price point, the creative, the copy is constantly changing every 30 days. And so new politics, know the impact. You know that that was the sort of the tagline, the kind of tagline we would run with. And it occurred to us that in that moment, maybe there was something simpler and more evergreen that would always win, that would always be the best thing to say in that moment. Right, new politics. There's value in the Wall Street Journal that's specific to the times we live in, right? We do live in a world of new politics, very much so. But maybe there's something just more basic and elemental that we could say. So we took a step back, and we tried to think of the dumbest thing we could say in this moment. That seems so obvious, right? It seems like a waste of time because it's something that they must already know. Continue reading your article with a WSJ membership. 37% order uplift. Absolutely nuts. CTAs. How are we on time? Okay. Yeah, so we've had a long-standing strategy of using Join Now and Act Now as our CTAs everywhere in the funnel. So it occurred to us, not surprisingly, that there are different moments at different times in the subscription funnel. And that in the context of an article roadblock, we weren't actually asking anyone to join or to act. And that there was an effort was implied in those verbs. We thought maybe we could soften it as they went into the shop page, where all we're trying to do here is come inside and do a little window shopping, right? Shopping's fun, there's no effort yet. Just that subtle copy change delivered an 18% order uplift for articles, for subscriptions from content. I'm going to skip the eye as a muscle just because I think we're tight on time. But center alignment has never lost in a test for us. I'll say that much. On the engagement side, the hand is a muscle, connecting the pipes. Before we got, you guys obviously have gotten the memo that I'm pretty obsessed with making sure there's a dollar value attached to all of our activities. So before we got in the world of engagement and product testing, I wanted to know how I could justify it when obviously we've been getting such powerful results on the acquisition side. And it occurred to me that for a subscription business, there's really only one engagement that matters if you can track it, which is that if they do it, did they stay longer? Did they pay me more money for a longer period of time? And we found out that some of the things we were trying to get people to do on onboarding, right, when they had just joined as new subscribers, did have a powerful impact on churn. So we found that when people were subscribing to newsletters and logging into our iOS app, in addition to using WSJ.com, it had a pretty powerful impact. We took those numbers to the finance department and said, how much money is that worth each time we get people to do it? And they told us. So now, armed with this bounty on the head of every time we can get someone to download an app or subscribe to a newsletter, we can begin. So the hand is a muscle. This was the onboarding portal that we inherited when we started doing testing on onboarding. Kind of a buffet style thing, right? There are these 4 things. We kind of just want you to do as many of them as you're willing to do. So the name of the game is having you to move as seamlessly and simply among this content as possible so that you can kind of connect with the thing you're willing to do as fast as possible. First thing we noticed is when you clicked on these modules, you had to click back to get back to the hub. Right? You didn't have to go back to the hub, but you still had to click on this sort of header nav to work your way among them, which again, it's not that hard, but it felt like there was just a little bit of friction that was unnecessary. So all we did is we took all that content and put it into a single page so that if you clicked on, say, that newsletter module, you'd get shot down to the newsletter content. So we were subtly indicating that you could use scroll to navigate between these 4 modules in addition to clicking. Just that tiny change delivered a 117% lift in app downloads and a 70% lift in newsletter signups. So simple. Connecting the pipes. This is our last test I'm going to show you guys. 80% of new subscribers to the Wall Street Journal on WSJ.com do so on their desktop computers. How do you get? Remember, we know how valuable app usage is as sort of a secondary means of finding value in our content. How do you get someone on a desktop computer to download our app and know it, right? Track it. There's no real good way. So all we did is we added some link texting technology. They enter their cell phone, it gets immediately forgotten, and it sends them a text which senses what kind of device they're on, sends them an appropriate app link, and we can track it all the way through to the point where they log into the app. Delivered almost 1,000% uplift in app downloads in our onboarding experience. Right, again, just such a simple thing to sort of step back and say, what am I missing here? That doesn't have to do with my copy or personalization. It has to do with the most elemental of questions. The principles that drive us: test everything with absolutely no exceptions. Prioritize, define your value, don't skip the low-hanging fruit, and go big. You only live once. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Got lots of good questions for you here. All right, first one. How do you justify the back test when it may temporarily hurt your business?
So the first, what I can tell you is that when you take that real number, when you get that real number out of that exercise, it's in the extremely high 8 figures. So I think that any business can say to itself, if I'm gonna show something that I know to be bad for less than 12 hours to get to 6 figures, to know that value, it's worth it. And secondly, I just kind of did it. I don't know. It had to be done. It had to be done.
Any concern that personalization will cause an echo chamber effect similar to that seen on Facebook where people will only see views supporting their beliefs?
Absolutely, which is exactly why we're trying to move very, very slowly into it. And I think when we get to that point, specifically when it comes to content recommendation, there will be a specifically close eye, right? Some of the messaging around subscription, right, there's less risk there from a, I don't know, cultural perspective. But I think just as you guys identified, we're very sensitive to some of those outcomes. So it's being approached very cautiously.
Often actions that correlate with low churn also correlate with users who intrinsically are more engaged, such as installing an app. How do you think about this?
Very good question. So there is 100% a blind spot here, which is that how do you get from correlation to causation? That is a difficult one, and it's not a question that I'm that good at answering. But the way that we thought about it was, do we want to wait around to figure that one out, or do you just want to get going? And is correlation good enough to feel confident that whatever you're doing is certainly not detracting from the subscriber experience, right? If we can get people to do things that look like good subscribers, then no bad can come from it. So it's certainly more of a dialogue than a final answer and approach to engagement and product testing, but it's a start.
I know you guys, you shared a lot of big wins with us, and so this is a good question, is can you tell us about some tests where you expected a big impact, but in fact did not see a relevant impact?
Good question. Yes, this is the highlight reel, guys. So it's not all wine and roses. There are many stinkers out there. The first thing to keep in mind is when you have a test that loses or that no one seems to care about, that's not a bad outcome, right? The value of knowing that something was a terrible idea is almost as valuable as knowing that something's a really good idea. Granted that you communicate it properly so you know that nobody ever does it again. Let's see. Last December, I don't like our pricing strategy. We have sort of complicated introductory prices that flow into sort of long-term pricing, which is somewhat obtuse, and I think there's friction there. I was completely convinced that I had come up with a way to solve that problem. So I made our operations team make me a whole host of new price points, which we tested last December, and nobody could have cared less. What else? I'm trying to think of something. I'm trying to think of a real stinker. I can't think of it right now, but I'm sure they're there. It's not because they're not there. My mind's a blank.
All right, last one. So we have someone that says, how about we all meet and compare our prioritization frameworks later? Are you going to be around for roundtables or happy hour later?
Yeah, I'm here tonight.
Okay, you guys, happy hour starts at 5 o'clock. We have whiskey tasting as well, but definitely find Peter, and I'm sure he'll share a little bit of a strategy. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Peter.